And this is the third lecture in the series, the final one on painting. So we've had portraiture, we've had landscape, and now we're going into abstraction. And we've seen, haven't we, that in portraiture, there's that kind of issue around, are we able to represent an individual, a person, or are we just representing kind of the soul or humanity in some way? So there's that sort of, scale around which portrait paintings sit. And we saw within landscape, there's a similar sort of thing in terms of a scale, sliding scale between showing just the beautiful, amazing world and the other end making some comment on it, usually through the inclusion of some of humanity's interventions or activities. And just similarly with abstract painting, there is this sort of continuum, I think, scale. Yeah, how close it is to representation and how far away it is. You see what I mean? Do we recognize anything in it or do we not? So painters are always trying to sort of grapple with that. And it can be quite, I've had times with abstract painters when you say completely the wrong thing. And I don't know if you've ever had this, but you're with an abstract painter and you say, oh, look, there's a duck in that one, and they're like absolutely horrified that you should notice a duck, when clearly they absolutely didn't want to put a duck in there at all. So that's, a humorous side of the debate. But how far, how can you see anything in it? Anyway, we're going to start off slightly differently. I'm going to give you some work to do. I'm going to say this picture, very famous, respected abstract painter called Howard Hodgkin. The title is Expressing Emotion Beyond Representation. So that gives you an idea of the feel of the lecture, doesn't it? But do you want to just tell me? Thing is about abstract painting, I think you've got to spend a bit of time with it. I don't think you can just have a quick glance and go away. We're in this speedy culture, aren't we, of not looking at things very long. But I think you have to spend, not that we can spend a lot of time with this one, unfortunately, but we can spend a couple of minutes. So what I want you to do is just spend a couple of minutes and then just in the chat, just give me some, feelings, some emotions, some observations, reflection, whatever you want to say about it. Let's just put some of these things in the chat and see what comes out. Okay, so let's just spend 2 minutes doing that, please. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Desert. Oh, you can probably all see it anyway, but it just puts ideas in people's heads, doesn't it? Okay, yeah, good. We're getting sort of the Earth's crust, rustic mountains. Jared, that's interesting. Yeah, the longer I looked at it, it suddenly picked up on a mouth and a nose or a moustache or something. Macy's seen a nose as well, slapdash nose with lips. Yeah, you don't like it? No, I'm not sure I'm a fan, but it sold for, I don't know, £800,000 or something. So somebody liked it. Jenny, that's interesting. Yeah, so with the pollution, the nickel mining, from yesterday's lecture, Batinsky's photograph, that's because of colour, isn't it? We've seen a recent colour like that, so we're attaching it to that. The frame, definitely part of the piece. So Hodgkin's well known for painting on the frame, using the frame as part of the piece. That's his kind of calling card in a way. Mouth and a nose, Beatrix, pollution, yeah. So we're getting, that's interesting, isn't it? So we're getting the earth stuff and we're getting a face. So that's a kind of, it's a really nice bit. What about sort of feelings? We're kind of what it reminds us of, but obviously you're irritated because it cost £800,000, but so you're probably feeling a bit angry, but are we getting any sort of feelings? Khadija, both anger and happiness. That's really interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. There's that deep red, which is a sort of anger, but then the yellow frame feels quite sort of upbeat. Right, so you didn't, okay, because it's got a funny thing. Yeah, good one. Alice is warmth, so that there is warmth coming out the middle there, isn't there, out of that colour? Joy and anger, the frame colour versus actually, there's a real, definitely relationship between the frame and the inside in terms of colour, contrast, sort of flash. Unsettling, it is unsettling, and I think some of that's to do with its kind of like rudeness. It's like a bit throwaway, slapdash, isn't it? Anyway, that's great. So that's exactly what I wanted to come out of this, really. A lot of different interpretations. People are picking up on different things. And I guess that is kind of abstract painting's role to an extent, isn't it? To make us sort of like reflect on ourselves or our feelings, our internal space, I suppose. Yeah, so it's very slippery, abstract painting, isn't it? We're beginning to see it. It's very slippery. Anyway, the next slide will reveal something to you. So this is the piece. You see, I've left a gap there for the title, you see. So obviously the next slide is going to give you the title. Venice Rain, there you go. So none of us got that. So he is well known for having wacky titles that don't relate at all in any way to his paintings. So some of them can be quite personal and quite emotional, and some of them can be quite descriptive. And I'm not sure, you know, again, he's a slippery abstract painter, so he's probably not going to tell us a lot about it, but he's quite vague about it. But for him, I guess this is the emotional response to that Venice Rain when he was in Venice. I would guess, without knowing the full story, I would guess. And that's fair enough, isn't it? Why not? You know, we all got different responses to things. Anyway, that's shown some of the complexities of abstract painting. And it's highlighted the idea of a title, which we'll come back to a little bit later. But let's do a little bit of a historic run through now. So generally, Hilma af Klint has appeared as this sort of original abstract painter. After a while, she wasn't discovered. You know, it was always men sort of dominating the early history of abstraction. But Hilma af Klint's come up. She was really interesting Swedish artist and mystic. She had like seances with the group. I think they were called a group called the Five, and they used to get together and have seances and stuff. So she used to paint some of the feelings. Now this is kind of abstract, but it's also, you can see shells, flowers, you know, nautilus shells, this kind of thing, maybe waves and stuff. So it's not as abstract can be, but it's pretty much there. Okay, so yeah, Hilma's generally thought of as one of the first abstract painters, but Kandinsky's probably the most famous. If people talk about abstract painting, Kandinsky's the person who sort of leaps forward. This is composition number 7 from 1913. A lot of big themes in Kandinsky's work, supposedly, like, you know, the resurrection, the Garden of Eden, it's suggested, are his influences. But the big thing about Kandinsky is, of course, his connection with music. So he, you know, this idea of synesthesia, the idea that music can be color, color can be music, like sounds, you can hear sounds through color. Yeah, which is obviously a big thing for abstraction. I mean, this one is one of those ones where you've got like ladders and you can start to see things appearing in this one. There's a face in there, some sort of insect, a bird. So it's not, yeah, it's very abstract. However, there are lots, there's a kind of another little bird in there. So depending, it's a bit like those Rorschach ink blot tests, isn't it? Depending who you are and your history and your experience and stuff, you'll probably see different things in this one. Moving on. Well, actually, it's moving back a bit, but around that time also we had the famous black square painting. So this is by Malevich. He's a Russian avant-garde artist and theorist, and part of the suprematists. Yeah. So what his quote was, he wanted to, his paintings were intended to desperate struggle to free art from the ballast of the objective world. So it's part of that struggle, yeah, to allow a different part of the mind or the human spirit or being to connect with art, rather than for it to be an objective painting that you respond to, or objectification of the world. Yeah, so that was part of his thing. He ended up just doing a completely black square. I can see it's all cracked now. That's because it's this is a recent photograph of it, so it's much more interesting than it was when it was just a black square. But it's it's like kind of like taking abstraction as far as we can. That's what he's done, isn't it? How far can I go with abstraction? Like by painting nothing. Okay, a black square. Okay, so that was his thing. And then we get onto something which is a little bit more considered, I guess, which is Mondrian, who again we all fix in there, kind of one of the major players in the field of abstraction. And this is, I suppose, we're talking about less emotional sort of work, but much more formal abstraction. So again, abstraction does move between the objective and the sort of cold formal to the more emotional end of it. Yeah. And this is really a rational composition, isn't it? It's about tension between forces, it's about composition, dynamics between different colors. Yeah. So it's about balance and dynamism. So yeah, in quite a cold sort of mechanical way. Obviously colors have emotions as well, so you can't withdraw that completely. But if we want to know Mondrian's depth a little bit more, I suppose this is the one we need to look at. So this is Broadway Boogie Woogie from 1930. And this is the one, again, which allows us to connect abstraction with other things. So this is supposedly a view from the top of a New York tower block, looking down to the streets of New York, the grid type streets of New York. This was his inspiration, but also combined with that and jazz. So he enjoyed the New York jazz scene. And this is a response to some of the music or the patterns of the music that you'd get in those jazz clubs. Okay. So it's kind of like a map almost of his experience of New York. Yeah. Seeing it and feeling it. So again, the title, without the title, we're not going to get any of that. So often with abstract painting, the title is pivotal in either pinning it down or letting it go. In this case, it pins it down quite well. William de Kooning, yeah, important American abstract expressionist. So and here's a quote from de Kooning up there: even abstract shapes must have a likeness. So he's sort of saying you can't have a shape without a likeness. So a black square is a bit like, I don't know, a drain cover, or a window with a curtain on it, a black curtain on it, or so everything is close to something if you want it to be. Yeah, this is one of his Two Women with a Still Life. So this is an interesting one to look at because it's kind of semi-abstract. Yeah, there's a lot of abstract shapes and stuff going on in here, but we can clearly see the women's faces, and we can clearly see the bodies, and we can clearly see the still life down here. So known very well as an abstract artist. However, a lot of his work is what we call sort of semi-abstract, I guess. Okay, so there is a place for work that isn't completely abstract. So he was around, with Pollock and that sort of thing. I wanted to I think it's really useful to look at other media when we talk about these things. As we've looked at photography and the other ones, I think we can look at sculpture here, because generally there is a sort of field of abstract sculpture. But again, I think it's very, very difficult with sculpture, with three-dimensional forms, to become as abstract as you can with painting, because I think this looks like, I don't know, sort of it could be a musical instrument, could be like a pot. So because of its 3D-ness, it resembles quite a lot of things because of its formal qualities. So it's quite difficult, and this is get away from that representational form. Pollock, of course, who we all know, this is number 31 from 1950, action painting. So that's the title of a form of abstraction related to the abstract expressionists, an action painter. Yeah, would lay the canvas on the floor, pour enamel paint over it, use sort of turkey basters straight out of the tube, splash it around. But they are extraordinarily powerful works just because of they're awesome, in terms of the scale and the amount of marks on there. And the fact they're also really well composed, this all over composition is pretty spectacular, I think. Very difficult thing to do. And then so we've got the action painters going on, and then we've got the color field painters. Okay, so there were like two sort of camps in America in the 50s, 60s. Rothko, color field painter. Okay, so they're some of the most iconic works of the 20th century. Very inspired by mythology, art history, really into the emotional qualities of paint and representation. So this is a quote from Rothko: "I'm not an abstractionist. I am not interested in the relationships of color or form or anything else. I'm interested only in expressing basic human emotions, tragedy, ecstasy, doom, and so on." So he didn't care how he did it. He wanted his work just to get a deep emotional response. Yeah. So some sort of like metaphysical communion with his viewers is what he was after. And for a lot of people, that is the case. Around that time, Agnes Martin was emerging. So a very different form of abstraction, because this is very, very skillfully applied, isn't it? A bit like Mondrian. So a lot of abstract painting is very rough and sort of ready, but there are certain painters where there's a real skill to application of media, and Agnes Martin's work is just wonderful like that. These really beautifully, carefully applied lines of pink and blue color, incredibly soothing. It's just minimalism, but you get this kind of incredible beauty and calmness. Well, I do anyway when I look at an Agnes Martin. It kind of hits you on a very, very different level than that daily sort of rushing around thing. So yeah, I absolutely love her work. Similarly, Bridget Riley, but Bridget Riley's playing a bit more sort of games with color and line and stuff. Op art, yeah, is the title of the sort of area she fits into. So she uses, I don't know, she gets inspiration from, this is some work actually that was inspired by a visit to Egypt. So her experience of the landscape and some of the paintings, I think, that she discovered in Egypt. And she has this optical effect where she's putting different colors next to each other and lines that give the sort of idea of movement or, just coming back to sculpture. Anish Kapoor, we might say, is an abstract sculptor. And this is a work to reflect an intimate part of the red, which is quite an interesting interesting title. But again, not, it's like we've got a lemon in there. This is a bit like a raspberry. That looks like a corner of a brick wall of a building. So again, it's very difficult with sculpture to actually, make it genuinely away from our human experience on a daily level. It's kind of very much stuck in that form of representation within which we live our daily lives. So quite difficult getting abstract sculpture. And here's Joan Mitchell, one of the most well thought of abstract painters. Probably shouldn't say this, but I'm not a huge fan myself, but she's, is very, very much admired. And this is, I just find it irritating to call this sunflowers. Sorry, Joan, but just I don't know. I feel sometimes abstract painters are playing some interesting games. Let's put it that way. I can't think of anything. I certainly wouldn't have called that sunflowers myself, or thought it was anything to do with sunflowers. But that connection between what Joan Mitchell was thinking and what she painted is quite. And these are massive canvases, and that. Not that much. I mean, God, people will argue with me, and she would if she was still alive, that there's a lot of consideration gone into certain colours at certain times. But to me, quite often, Joan Mitchell's look a little bit too random, I suppose, for me to really enjoy. But they are very spectacular when you see them in the museums. They're very large, and I love the way she uses the diptych. The two, you get a nice sort of almost like a journey between them, like time passing, which is quite an interesting approach. Anyway, the last two lectures I've talked a bit about photography, and I'm going to just mention that again. I think photography is not a great player in the world of abstract art. I think within abstract art, painting is the place for abstraction. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There are some photographers though who use abstraction in an interesting way and get away with it. This is Hiroshi Sugimoto, the fantastic Japanese/American photographer, who's been photographing the sea and the horizon of the sea for many, many years, and traveled all over the world photographing different horizons and different seas. And really, it just almost looks like a Mark Rothko with the two tones, the white and the grey. But you can see the ripples of the water in there. So it's very close to representational, but very, very abstract. So it's rare in photography to get photographers who work this close to abstraction, but Sugimoto is one of them. I mean, it is, if you get a chance to see it, it was in the Hayward Gallery in London a couple of years ago. It was fantastic. You can see all his seas put together. I mean, they're all different. Some have got a blacker sky than a sea. Some of them are very similar tones. It's a really powerful experience to see them all together. I mean, technical tour de force, achieving this kind of thing. And coming up to the 21st century, we've got Julie Meheretu, who's an important painter. This is a piece she made in Istanbul called Empirical Construction. And she took a load of panoramic photographs from the top of the old city, and she used those for this painting. And she tends to use sort of like maps or statistics about the weather or the amount of people moving between one place and the next, fragments of like, yeah, the present and the future put together. So they almost become this sort of like, yeah, map of a time and place. I suppose that's how I describe it. But yeah, very abstract, although we can see like bits of bunting and things. Again, it's difficult not to get something representational in there. But you get these like roads, three-dimensional sort of pathways, and maps and graphs. Very, very beautiful paintings. And one of my favorites is Mark Bradford, amazing American painter. This is Scorched Earth from 2006. So he's collage and paint, and he often uses materials he finds in the city. So he will go around the city and, find old bits of advertising from billboards, things like that, or posters and things like that, and put them into his paintings. And they're very sort of grid-like. But this one is called Scorched Earth, and it's kind of like, a lot of these, this one I think is based on the 1921 Tulsa race massacre. So 100 years ago, there was, a massacre in Tulsa. And this is based on that. And the idea of the black area, of the city. He's kind of looking down like a map again, isn't he? And this is the sort of black area of the city where these atrocities kind of occurred. So, yeah, it's got a real sort of political and historical weight to it, as well as being very, very beautiful. And that's why I like him so much, is because he is making sort of some pretty direct references to some pretty big stuff. Yeah, he's managing to do it through abstraction, which I think is extraordinarily difficult. Yeah, if you get to see his paintings, please do. I mean, they've got wonderful surfaces. He uses like power tools and glue and gouging things, and they're very, very three-dimensional surfaces. But yeah, my favorite abstract painter, I think. And Cecily Brown. And I think this is, again, moving in towards semi-abstraction. And I find them very, very intriguing, because this one's called Skull Diver 4. You can see there's a kind of a skull in here, and then there's somebody here like a laid out like a figure with an arm and a face, maybe on their back, and so there's this kind of crossover between figuration, abstraction, and the male and the female body. Very intriguing paintings with this very sort of quite often sort of old master color palettes. There's a lot of art history in them as well. Okay, and finally, Gerhard Richter, who's generally thought to be the most important abstract painter alive today, but doesn't seem to be making abstract paintings at the moment. I don't know. They're very chaotic and messy. Again, huge paintings, wonderful to see. Uses squeegees to sort of squeegee the paint across the surface and make these crazy marks up and down. They are pretty spectacular. That's the one thing you can say. And I think difficult to see anything in them, anything representational in them. So they definitely tick that box regarding abstraction. But yeah, what decisions he makes, what choices he makes in terms of what happens, I don't know. But maybe that's the subconscious coming out in terms of a process which he likes. Yeah, okay, that's the last slide. So just to sum up again, good. Yeah, so the tension between non-representational and the question of whether abstract can mean something continues to be debated. So where does meaning lie with an abstract painting? Yeah, does it lie with us trying to work out what the hell it is, or is there no meaning at all? And is it all just about feeling and emotion? Okay, so that's the continued tension that we find. The artist's intention is rarely the viewer's interpretation. So, I mean, we saw it with this one. If this is Venice Rain or whatever it was by Hodgkin, then none of us got that, But however, with Gerhard Richter, probably no intention at all. He's just making extraordinarily chaotic coloured canvases with lots and lots of paint. Okay, so again, there's a continuum there between one and the other. Yeah, painting is probably the most successful medium through which to express pure abstraction. We've seen that sculpture do it, and does, but it still really does become quite representational. Photography, it's rare to find a sort of important photographer, I suppose, who's an abstract photographer. There are very few. Most of the important photographers who are taken very seriously are much more using photography to record the world, and it's more representational. Yeah, and this is again that continuum with abstraction. Abstract painters do formalist readings, like some of the Mondrian's balances of color and stuff, and emotional or expressive readings, like Cicely Brown at the end there with the figure and the skull, where it's much more emotional and much more expressive. So we've got another scale to work our paintings along. Yeah, is classifying abstract painting in terms of beauty possible? This is or by its nature, does it challenge traditional aesthetics? And I think that's the interesting one, and maybe that's what we see with Joe Mitchell. Maybe that's what we see with these sort of abstract painters who really are playing crazy games with color and titles and just trying to get us away from a traditional idea. Oh, that's a sunflower. We know what that looks like and we know why it's beautiful. So yeah, is there an aesthetic that we can attach to abstraction, or has it its own special sort of language which we can't attach a theory to? Wow, there you go. That's a big point to end on, isn't it? Anyway, that's great. So that was a quick trawl through some pretty major abstract paintings and some of the issues when we think about how we respond to them. But yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for being involved at the start there on the Hodgkin. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And I shall hopefully see some of you soon. In a couple of weeks, I'm doing a lecture on what looking forward, really, some what we might see. So hopefully, I'm sure some of you will be there. Some of you'll be there for that, which would be great. Anyway, have a good couple of weeks, and thanks very much for participating. Bye. Thanks, everyone. Nice comments. Thank you.